Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Aaron.
Aaron is here, everyone. Welcome back for more SPTV, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. Not a good day for Danny Masterson and his appeal team. Guys, let's get right down to business. You know who done messed up? Well, first of all, Danny Masterson done messed up. I mean, that goes without saying. But his appeal team has done messed up as well. We are going to expose one of the biggest lies in Danny Masterson's appeal brief. And I got to tell you, the claims made by Danny and his team in this appeal brief about the Jane Does, for some reason, is being picked up and amplified and signal boosted by the media. And they are not picking up on what is wrong with the claims, and that they are easily, demonstrably false and inflammatory. This appeal has absolutely no chance of getting approved. I'm just going to call it right now. Now, that might be an easy call. Most appeals have very little chance of getting approved. But the fact that they're leaning so heavily on an easily, provably false argument that the Jane Does had an undisclosed financial motivation to relentlessly pursue a criminal conviction against Danny Masterson, because a criminal conviction was the only way that they were going to be able to move forward with a civil lawsuit against Danny Masterson, specifically for the sexual assaults, the rape, and that their incentive was financial. They really needed that lawsuit for the rapes to make a ton of money, but the statute of limitations was expired on that. So the only way they could move forward with that lawsuit was by getting a criminal conviction, and the jury deserved to know that underlying financial motivation, and that a criminal conviction was the only path forward that the Jane Does had to file a lawsuit against Danny for rape. That is so easily proven false, and that is what we're going to do here today. So to get it started, let me just show you what has been reported in Rolling Stone. Then we're going to go over the actual a section of the actual brief itself, and then we're going to get into the truth. Okay, Rolling Stone reports, Danny Masterson attacks rape victims in new oversized appeal brief. Danny Masterson is seeking to overturn his conviction with claims that his two rape victims had evolving stories and a financial interest in his criminal prosecution. Remember, guys, Danny was unanimously convicted on two charges of forcible rape, two separate women, but he was charged with a third. There were multiple other victims who testified, for whom Danny was not charged, but they testified as past bad acts witnesses. No less than 8 women in different states, different countries, from different decades, both in Scientology and out of Scientology, have come forward saying they've been raped by Danny Masterson. So let's not make the mistake of thinking there's only 2 victims. He was only convicted unanimously for 2 victims. So that's just wanted to clarify that. Okay, Danny Masterson submitted a massive, admittedly oversized appeal brief in his California rape case Wednesday that challenges the credibility of his victims and claims a series of trial court errors requires the reversal of his 2023 conviction. A 246-page filing obtained by Rolling Stone is yet to be accepted by the state's Court of Appeal, but it lays out the arguments he believes are his best shot at overturning his 2 forcible rape convictions and his sentence of 30 years to life in prison. If the court denies his request to, okay, we're going to skip that. Cliff Gardner, whose other clients include Eric and Lyle Menendez, shared the appeal brief on his website, along with a statement claiming that he is working towards Danny Masterson's complete exoneration. Cliff Gardner claimed the state's prosecution of Danny Masterson, who is best known for his role on That 70s Show, had 2 fundamental flaws. The trial was rife with erroneous judicial rulings that skewed the jury's view of the evidence against him, and there was a stunning amount of exculpatory evidence which was never presented to the jury. He added that a separate petition known as a writ of habeas corpus would be filed soon by a different appellate lawyer and would document additional defects in the trial process while requesting Danny Masterson's release. Danny Masterson, a prominent Scientologist in good standing, was charged in 2020 with forcibly raping 3 women on different occasions during the height of his sitcom fame in the early 2000s. An initial trial ended with a hung jury, but the follow-up jury found him guilty of raping 2 of the Jane Does. Both trials included emotional testimony from the three women. They all said that Danny Masterson drugged them before forcibly raping them. They were practicing Scientologists at the time and testified that the Church of Scientology officials protected Danny Masterson. In his new appellate brief, Danny Masterson alleges the two women had evolving stories that changed dramatically over the years. He claims that while one of the Jane Does reported her rape to the police in 2004, it was not until 13 years later that she claimed for the first time that Danny Masterson displayed a gun during her attack. At trial, the Jane Doe testified that she had told police many details that officers allegedly neglected to include in their reports. Police did record the Jane Doe's initial police interview, but investigators lost the recording by 2020. Yes, that is correct, and I will repeat that for the record. The LAPDs, who were known to be friendly with Scientology and were handling this initial Danny Masterson investigation, lost the recording of the first interview with Jane Doe 1. Sure they did. Sure they did. They lost it in the circular file. Okay. Danny Masterson also argues in his brief that the trial court erred when it excluded evidence that the Jane Does had a strong financial incentive in obtaining criminal convictions for forcible rape. The trial court excluded evidence showing that if the complaining witnesses obtained forcible rape convictions against Mr. Masterson, state law would provide a new one-year window. This is the key, guys. This is the key that's being claimed in the appeal. Okay. I'm going to reread the sentence. The trial court excluded evidence showing that if the complaining witnesses obtained forcible rape convictions against Mr. Masterson, state law would provide a new one-year window within which they could file rape-based causes of action, entitling them to a dramatically greater damage award than the existing lawsuit for harassment damages. And predictably, within 1 year of the criminal verdict, both Jane Does moved to amend their pending lawsuit to do just that. Okay. Both of those statements are completely false. And the fact that so much of the appeal brief, I mean, this is just one paragraph in a news article summarizing the appeal brief. So much of the appeal brief rests on the fact that the jury was denied this incredibly pertinent and damaging information, that the only way that Jane Does could possibly move forward with a lucrative rape-based lawsuit against Danny Masterson is to see him convicted. And that is really why they are here today. This is proven false in two ways. Okay. And before I get to that, I actually want to share you the actual section of the report itself, or one of them. This is the appeal brief. And we are going to go right down to page 24. Okay. Reading directly from the appeal brief. But the statute of limitations issue here was just the tip of the unreliability iceberg. As discussed in argument 2, the trial court erroneously excluded evidence that the complaining witnesses had a direct monetary interest in the outcome of the criminal trial and a strong financial incentive to characterize the long past sexual encounters as forcible rape. At the time of the trial, the complaining witnesses had a pending civil lawsuit against Mr. Masterson for damages arising from what they alleged was harassment that occurred after they came forward against him in 2017. Although the civil lawsuit referred to the facts regarding the long past sexual encounters, it did not allege any cause of action or seek damages for rape because the civil statute of limitations had long since expired. The trial court excluded evidence showing that if the complaining witnesses obtained forcible rape convictions against Mr. Masterson, state law would provide a new one-year window within which they could file rape-based causes of action, entitling them to a dramatically greater damage award than the existing lawsuit for harassment damages. And predictably, within 1 year of the criminal verdict, both JB, that's Jane Doe 1, and NT, she's already publicly come out as Nisha Trout, but in the trial, she was Jane Doe 2, moved to amend their pending lawsuit to do just that. Incredible. Incredible. Okay, so where's the falsity? Okay, what's true is that in a normal circumstance, in a vacuum, other circumstances notwithstanding, yes, if you get a criminal conviction, You then have a 1-year window to file a civil lawsuit for that cause of action, even if the statute of limitations had already expired. The problem is that did not apply to the Jane Does in this case, because the state of California had already signed into law a look-back window that applied to these women, that they already had the ability to file the lawsuit. And regardless of whether Danny Masterson was convicted or not. And so what I'm talking about is California Assembly Bill 2777. Okay, let's look at this. Here are the details of California Assembly Bill 2777 from the 2021-2022 legislative session. Title: Sexual Assault Statute of Limitations. Summary: the statute of limitations. Summary: statute of limitations. This bill extends the statute of limitations for adult survivors of sexual assault to file civil claims for damages. That's fine. It's the look-back window here that's actually applicable. Look-back window. This bill establishes a 1-year look-back window for adults who were 40 years old or older as of January 1st, 2023, to file lawsuits for sexual abuse incidents that occurred on or after January 1, 2009, and before January 1, 2019. This window was set to open on January 1st, 2023, and close on December 31st, 2023. Okay, so that is the look back window. And you can see that this piece of legislation was passed by the Assembly in May 2022. It was passed by the Senate in August 2022. It was signed into law September 2022. Okay, when did Danny Masterson's first trial get underway? Let me just double check my notes here. October 2022. By the time the criminal trial started, by the time the jury was seated, by the time Danny Masterson was on trial, there was already a look-back window in place that applied to Danny Masterson's victims where they could file a lawsuit for rape. They did not need a conviction. And the evidence of that is that several of Danny Masterson's victims, for whom he was not convicted of rape. Okay, so this is Jane Doe 3, Chrissy Bixler. This is Trish Vesey, who testified in the first trial as a past bad acts witness, but Danny was never charged with a crime against her. And Babette Realis, someone who I believe ended up actually not testifying in either trial, but did appear in the final episode of Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath, and spoke about her story of being raped by Danny Masterson. Those are examples of 3 women, 3 victims of Danny Masterson, who filed a lawsuit against him or moved to amend their lawsuit to include causes of action for rape, even though Danny Masterson was not convicted of raping them. Okay, so the fact that Danny Masterson's attorneys are sitting there going, this is a major flaw in the lawsuit, that the jury was not informed of this financial incentive, is easily proven false. Okay. You also have the fact that most of the other complaints in this appeal are things that Danny Masterson already tried to appeal after the preliminary hearing. Now, my understanding, and I could get this wrong because I'm not a lawyer, guys, is that you can appeal after the fact. But what Danny did before the fact, it was after the preliminary hearing and before the first trial, is he submitted a writ with all of these same complaints. Let me just double check something here. I made a couple notes. Yeah. Things, complaining about the fact that certain witnesses that had exculpatory evidence had already passed away, strangely citing Jane Doe 1's own father in that, as if Jane Doe 1's father was very much trying to get Danny Masterson prosecuted. He was not on Danny Masterson's side. One of Danny Masterson's best friends, Brighton Goss, had passed away. Apparently, he had some sort of exculpatory. It's always the dead people that have all the evidence the jury should have heard. Complaining about the right to, being denied the right to due process, statute of limitations, all these sort of things. He already submitted a writ to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals after the preliminary hearing, making all these same complaints. Danny Masterson has already been denied by the same judges in the same circuit that he's currently appealing to. That's another thing that none of the reporting on this has actually mentioned. The other thing that has not been mentioned, they talk about how the Jane Does had this undisclosed financial incentive, but what they don't want you to know is the financial disincentive that existed, that in this very specific case, Jane Doe 1 absolutely disregarded and moved forward anyway, despite the fact that she was potentially going to be on the hook for millions and millions of dollars of damages against Danny Masterson, because, as was testified to in Danny Masterson's trials, there had been a confidential settlement and non-disclosure agreement arranged by Scientology between Danny Masterson and Jane Doe 1 for some hundreds of thousands of dollars that Scientology made sure occurred. Now, to any Scientologist, former Scientologist out there, that is all the evidence that you need to show Scientology itself, after thoroughly investigating this, already determined by their own criteria that Danny Masterson had raped Jane Doe 1. Scientology would never allow a Scientologist to accept hundreds of thousands of dollars from a Scientology celebrity if they had concluded this was not real. They would never permit that in a million years. And yet that is exactly what Scientology arranged. And because of this NDA, Jane Doe 1 was, I think, on the hook for potentially $250,000 for every single violation of the NDA, which would be speaking about Danny or what happened with Danny to literally anyone. And in pursuit of these criminal charges, year after year after year, all of the years that this went on, Jane Doe 1 violated this NDA in so many ways. And she knew she was putting herself at risk. She knew there was a chance Danny could try to come after her for this. And what was interesting is that at one point in the second trial specifically, Philip Cohen, one of Danny Masterson's attorneys, the judge had given him a certain amount of time for his cross-examination of Jane Doe 1. And at the end of his time, the judge said, okay, your time's up. And he's like, oh, but Your Honor, I haven't even gotten to the good part yet. I have got to ask her these questions about the NDA and all this stuff. And the judge's like, well, you should have spent your time better. Maybe you shouldn't have spent so much time asking her about the temperature of the water in the jacuzzi. And you just should have gotten to the good stuff when I told you how much time that you had left. And it was generally thought that, that Danny's team would use in their appeal filing the fact that they did not have an opportunity to question Jane Doe 1 about this NDA. And yet the one thing that does not appear anywhere in this appeal filing is any mention about the NDA. And that is because the information about the NDA is very, very bad, not just for Danny Masterson, but also for Scientology. Because not only did because Marty Singer was the attorney that Scientology got involved in that process. And Marty Singer, you guys can fact check me on this. Was this leaked testimony from a grand jury? I think this might have been leaked testimony from a grand jury where Marty Singer implied, if not stated, that Scientology itself may have actually paid Marty Singer's legal fees, not Danny Masterson. And that Scientology picking up the bill for that legal action may not have just included his legal fees. It may have included the actual settlement money itself. This may have been money that Scientology took out of its own pockets to try to keep Jane Doe 1 from ever being able to go public with what happened about being raped by Danny Masterson. And so not only would all of that be terrible for Scientology, even more so than Danny Masterson, but it would also show that Jane Doe 1, contrary to having some sort of a financial incentive to pursue criminal charges or cooperate, I realize it's not the victims that are pursuing the charges. It's the prosecutors, but you guys know what I mean. Not only did she not have a financial incentive, she had a pretty big financial disincentive that she completely disregarded. And that it might bring up the question, I wonder why Danny Masterson didn't try to sue Jane Doe 1. Because remember, she's violating all of these, she's piling up all these violations of the NDA by speaking to this person, speaking to that person, hoping to gather enough evidence. Because remember, the LAPD allowed the Jane Does to initiate phone calls from a recorded police line to people to gather evidence from these witnesses who the LAPD knew as Scientologists were not going to cooperate, but who in private conversations might actually admit to things. And every time Jane Doe 1 did one of these recorded phone calls with some of Danny Masterson's friends and his publicist and all these people, she was violating her NDA. And she was doing this without the security of knowing that it was ever going to pan out in the end. Okay. So not only was there no financial incentive, there was a pretty large financial disincentive, but the appeals team, of course, wouldn't want you to know that. And they also wouldn't want to open up the can of worms to have the prosecutors respond to the appeal brief with all of the juicy information about what happened leading up to the NDA between Danny Masterson and Jane Doe 1. Yeah, pretty big deal. All right, let's see if there's anything else I noted down here. That's it. If I think of anything else, I can always do another video anyway, you guys. All right, let's keep it at that. Much more to come later today and this weekend. Stay tuned, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not,